You come here with a question that has been burning inside you, a wound that has not yet found its language. Why is it, you ask, that when you decide to live authentically, when you dare to show the truth of your being, you suddenly appear in the tales of others as the villain, the enemy, the threat? Why is it that sincerity, which ought to be light, casts such deep shadows in the eyes of those who are not prepared to face the real? It is not simply a social phenomenon, nor merely the cruelty of gossip. It is something archetypal, something woven into the very dynamics of human consciousness and the structures of the collective psyche. To understand this, we must journey not only into psychology, but into myth, dream, and the subterranean rivers of the soul. The first thing you must recognize is that the human psyche does not live in reality as such. It lives in stories. Person, whether consciously or unconsciously, is a storyteller. We are born into the narratives of our family. We absorb the myths of our culture. We weave the fragile threads of our ego into a tapestry of identity. When you encounter another human being, you are rarely encountering their soul in its naked essence. You are encountering a mask, a persona, carefully formed and maintained, so that life remains bearable and the chaos of the unconscious is kept at bay. The persona is not evil. It is necessary, for without a mask, we would be devoured by the raw forces of instinct and collective archetypes. But when a person begins to identify completely with his mask, when they forget that they are more than the story they perform, then the real becomes intolerable. To meet someone who lives outside of masks, who carries within them the courage of authenticity, is to feel one's own fiction trembling on the verge of collapse. It is at this threshold that you are turned into the villain, not because you have harmed, not because you have intended destruction, but because your existence in truth becomes unbearable to the one who clings to the false. Their psyche must defend itself. For if it admitted that your reality is genuine, then it would be forced to see its own falsity. And so, in the hidden chambers of their unconscious, a defense is mounted, projection begins its silent work. They cast upon you the shadow they cannot face in themselves. The liar calls you deceptive. The manipulator calls you controlling. The envious one calls you arrogant. Each word spoken against you is not so much about you as it is a revelation of what they refuse to see in the mirror. You become the vessel of their disowned truths, the scapegoat carrying their hidden shadow into the wilderness of collective imagination. Think of the ancient rituals, when tribes would place their sins upon a goat and drive it into the desert. The people felt cleansed, purified, not because the evil was gone, but because it was projected outward. You, the authentic soul, often become the scapegoat in the psychic economy of the collective. And so the tale is told: you are dangerous, you are selfish, you are mad. Yet beneath this accusation lies their trembling fear that you are real, and that reality might dissolve the fragile structure of their illusions. Let me take you deeper. In dreams, when an image arises that does not fit the ego's narrative, it is often rejected, labeled as monstrous or demonic But the monster in dreams is rarely the enemy. It is the bearer of what has been repressed, the guardian of a threshold. The villain you appear to be in the stories of others is nothing but this archetypal figure. You carry the energy of disruption, the energy of awakening, like the trickster who enters the tribe to upset order. You do not allow the lie to rest comfortably. To them, you are chaos. But in truth, you are the herald of individuation. This is why authenticity is always crucified before it is glorified. The Christ figure, the Socratic figure, the mystic who dares to speak each of them is branded. To a villain before time reveals them as a prophet. The collective cannot immediately discern truth from threat, for truth is always a threat to the structures that maintain comfort. There is an old story from alchemy that I must tell you, because alchemy is the symbolic language of the soul. The alchemist knew that in order to find the gold, one had to begin with the blackness, the nigredo, the putrefaction of the known world. The matter had to be dissolved, broken, reduced to chaos before transformation was possible. When you live authentically, you embody this alchemical process. You carry the energy of dissolution into the stagnant systems of others, and to those who wish to remain untransformed, you appear as the blackening agent, the destroyer, the villain. But to the one who is secretly ready for transformation, you appear as the guide, the necessary darkness that precedes the dawn of new consciousness. Now, I ask you to turn inward. Why does it wound you so deeply to be cast as the villain? It is because within yourself there still lives the archetype of the innocent one, the longing to be seen purely, the desire to be the hero in every tale. Yet individuation demands that you sacrifice even this desire. You cannot control the stories others tell about you. You can only live the truth that is yours. To accept being the villain in another story is to embrace the shadow role willingly, to carry the weight of misunderstanding without allowing it to deform your soul. This is the crucifixion of the ego, the descent into the underworld, where reputation and approval die. And yet from this death comes the birth of a deeper freedom, for you are no longer enslaved to the narratives of others. You become sovereign, anchored not in masks but in essence. Imagine this as if it were a dream. You are walking through a town and suddenly you hear whispers. Vaartje stern, eyes narrow. And, the tale being told is not yours but theirs. You feel the sting of exile, the ache of being misread. But then you realize the town itself is a dream symbol. The whispering voices are not people, but aspects of your own psyche, projections of your own fear of rejection. To endure this dream is to awaken within it, to say, let them tell their stories, I remain real, I remain whole. And in this awakening, the whispers lose their power, for you are no longer seeking to be painted as a saint. You are willing to carry the shadow as well. This is the secret. Authenticity is always paradoxical. To be whole, you must accept that you are both light and darkness, both hero and villain. The false world demands that you remain one-dimensional, polished, agreeable, but the real soul cannot be contained in such simplicity. When you are true, You will inevitably provoke, you will inevitably disturb, for your very being reminds others of the depths they refuse to face. And so they will write their stories, but you must ask yourself, would you rather live imprisoned in their fiction, or would you rather walk the lonely road of truth? Even if it casts you as the antagonist, I tell you now, the psyche of the world needs villains like you. Not the villains of malice, but the villains of authenticity, the ones who break illusions simply by existing. You are the dream figures that disturb complacency, the shadows that point toward hidden treasure. In myth, the hero cannot find the gold without first facing the dragon. Often, you are that dragon for others. Do not shrink from it. Do not soften your scales to be loved, for in time, those who are ready will see that the dragon was guarding not destruction but treasure. And those who cannot see, let them dream their smaller dreams. You are not bound to their level of perception. And so, you see, to be real is to accept the archetype of the villain, not as condemnation, but as initiation. For in carrying the projections of others, you become their mirror, their teacher, whether they acknowledge it or not. In every false story told about you, there is hidden a fragment of truth about them. And this is how the unconscious works. It speaks through distortion. It reveals itself in accusation. Do not waste your energy defending every charge. Instead, listen with symbolic ears. What are they revealing about themselves when they name you the villain? What shadow are they unwilling to face? This is the sacred knowledge that allows you to remain unbroken, to walk in authenticity without bitterness. You realize that you are not merely the victim of lies. You are the participant in a deeper drama of the collective psyche, the alchemical process of shadow projection and individuation. Thus, I tell you, when they call you the villain, smile inwardly. Know that you are touching the archetypal wound. Know that you are walking in the footsteps of all who dare to be real. And remember, reality does not need to be defended. It only needs to be lived. The villain they see is their shadow. The real you is beyond their story. And in the silence of your being, in the depths of your own soul, truth remains untouchable. When you contemplate this mystery, you will begin to sense that the role of villain is not an accident of human interaction, but an archetypal inevitability. The psyche organizes reality into opposites, for consciousness itself is born out of tension. Every story needs a shadow. Every hero needs an adversary. Every community unconsciously selects a figure upon which to project what it cannot accept within itself. And when you choose the path of authenticity, you often become this figure. You become the one who embodies what others deny, and thus, whether you wish it or not, you are written into the myths of their lives as the antagonist. This is not because of your essence, but because of their refusal to meet their own depth. Think of the myths of old. The prophet who speaks the truth is cast as a blasphemer. The healer who brings new medicine is branded a sorcerer. The philosopher who questions is condemned as corrupting the youth. Each one bears the mark of villainy, not because they are corrupt, but because they embody what the collective unconscious resists. To live authentically is to enter this lineage, to stand in the stream of those who carried light, so real that others saw only shadow. This is why I tell you that authenticity is crucifixion before it is resurrection. It is exile before it is return. It is descent into the underworld before it is the ascent into light. The underworld is not merely a mythic place. It is a psychological reality. When you are branded as the villain, you are forced into it. You experience isolation, rejection, misunderstanding, but do not mistake this exile as punishment. It is initiation. The underworld strips away your need for external validation, burns away your dependence on the good opinion of others, and forces you into direct communion with your own soul. Here, in the dark womb of the earth, you discover a freedom that cannot be taken, for it no longer relies on collective approval. This is the path of individuation, and it is always lonely, always demanding, always marked by the role of the villain in the stories of the false. Now, let us look more closely at why false people cannot endure the presence of the real. A false person is one who has built their entire life upon identification with persona. They live for appearances, for the approval of others, for the fragile image that they present to the world. Their sense of self is not rooted in the deep soil of the unconscious, but floats on the surface like a mask held by trembling hands. To such a person, reality is threatening. Your authenticity exposes the instability of their mask. They see in you what they cannot bear to see in themselves. And because they cannot face the naked truth, they rewrite the story. They recast you as the villain, so that they may remain the hero in their fantasy. This is how the unconscious protects itself from collapse. Projection is not chosen consciously. It is automatic, instinctual, but when you live near such people, you become their mirror. And they must either see themselves or destroy the mirror. Most choose the latter, and so they tell their tales. They gather others around them and whisper, and the collective joins in for a too fierce reality. This is why lies spread faster than truth, why rumors burn brighter than the flame of authenticity. The collective unconscious resonates with projection because it is easier to cast the shadow outward than to face it within. But do not despair, for in this pattern lies also the secret of your power. Every projection cast upon you confirms that you are touching something real, something vital, something that the psyche can no longer contain. If you were not real, they would not need to invent such fictions about you. The intensity of their stories reveals the magnitude of their fear. Let me tell you of a dream that often appears in those who stand upon the threshold of authenticity. They dream of being chased by a mob, accused of crimes they did not commit, hunted through streets of unfamiliar towns. At first, the dreamer awakens in terror, believing it to be a nightmare of persecution. But if one looks deeper, one sees that this is the psyche's way of revealing initiation. The mob is not the enemy, but the chorus of unconscious voices that resist transformation. The chase is the pressure of the collective upon the individual soul. And if the dreamer has courage, if they turn and face the mob, they will discover that the accusers dissolve into shadows, that their voices lose power, and that the dreamer stands alone So verein, awake. This is not merely a dream. It is the image of what you live when you are real among the folds. You are pursued, accused, misunderstood. But if you endure, you awaken into a freedom that none can touch. I tell you now, the world has always crucified what is real. The prophets of old, the mystics, the visionaries, all of them were cast as villains in their time. Only later, when the collective was ready, were they recognized as bearers of truth. You must decide whether you will wait for such recognition or whether you will walk in truth regardless of recognition. For recognition is not guaranteed, and to demand it is to remain enslaved. The deeper calling is to live authentically even if you are forever misunderstood. To carry the role of villain with dignity, knowing that it is not a reflection of your essence but of the shadows of others. This is the radical courage of individuation, to remain real even when every story around you casts you otherwise. But here lies another mystery within yourself. There are false voices, inner personas, masks you still cling to, and when you live authentically, even these inner voices will cast you as villain. They will accuse you of betrayal, of madness, of arrogance. These are the voices of the internalized collective, the echoes of family myths, cultural narratives, and childhood wounds. To endure being the villain in the eyes of others, you must also endure being the villain in the eyes of these inner figures. This is perhaps the hardest task, for it is one thing to be misunderstood by others, but another to be accused by your own psyche. Yet even here, the path is the same. Do not defend. Do not argue. But endure. Allow the voices to speak and know that they are shadows, fragments of the psyche, resisting change. With time, they too will dissolve, and your inner being will stand freer, less fragmented, more whole. You see now that the villain is not an accident, but an archetype. In myth, the villain often carries wisdom disguised in darkness. The dragon guards the treasure, the monster blocks the path to the underworld, the witch holds the knowledge of transformation. To others you may appear as such figures because you hold within you the disruptive energy of truth. But remember, these figures are never simply destroyers. They are initiators. Without them, no hero could grow, no soul could awaken. And so, even if the collective brands you as villain, you are secretly playing the role of initiator in their story. They may never thank you. They may never see it. But the archetype remains. Your reality disturbs them into confrontation with themselves. That is the hidden service you perform by being real. This is why you must not fall into despair. The pain of rejection is deep, but beneath it is a deeper calling. To live authentically is to walk the path of the alchemist, who takes the lead of misunderstanding and transforms it into the gold of inner freedom. Do not measure your worth by how you are portrayed in the tales of others. Measure it by your own fidelity to the truth within you. For only that fidelity endures beyond death, beyond history, beyond the shifting illusions of the world. When you stand at the end of your life, it will not matter whether they call you villain or hero. It will only matter whether you were true, and the soul, unlike the crowd, cannot be deceived. So, if you feel yourself condemned, remember this: you are not alone. Every authentic soul has walked this way. Every prophet, every mystic, every seeker of truth has carried the same burden, and in the depths of the psyche, they walk with you still. You are part of a great lineage, the silent brotherhood and sisterhood of those who chose reality over illusion, truth over acceptance, essence over mask. And though the crowd may call you villain, the archetypal reality whispers another name, real, and that, in the end, is worth more than all the false praises of the world. There is a truth that most people spend their lives avoiding, and it is this: to live authentically is to break the spell of the collective. The collective thrives on agreement, on sameness, on shared illusions that provide a sense of safety, but the authentic soul refuses this pact. You no longer nod along to lies. You no longer participate in the unspoken rituals of denial. You no longer bend your being into the shape that others demand. This refusal, quiet though it may be, is an earthquake to those who have built their houses on sand. They sense in you not only difference but danger. For if one person awakens, then the dream of the many is threatened, and the collective fears nothing more than awakening. Thus, your authenticity is cast in their story as rebellion, arrogance, villainy. It is easier for them to demonize you than to question the foundations of their own life. If they admitted your reality, then they would have to face the falsity of their own. And so, unconsciously, they protect themselves by turning you into the villain. This is the psychic immune system of the collective. But I tell you, this immune system does not protect health. It protects disease. It resists transformation. It resists confrontation with truth. And when you understand this, you begin to see that your role as villain is, in fact, the sign that you are living authentically. Consider the archetype of the trickster found in myths across cultures. The trickster is never loved by the tribe, never welcomed with open arms. He is mocked, feared, rejected, but beneath his mischief lies a profound necessity. He destabilizes the rigid order so that new life may emerge. Without the trickster, the tribe stagnates. Without disruption, growth is impossible. When you live authentically, you often embody this archetype to others. They see you as chaotic, threatening, even dangerous, but in reality, you are shaking loose the rigidity of their illusions. You do not conform, and in your non-conformity, you reveal the possibility of another way. You do not bow to the false gods of appearances, and in your refusal, you remind others that they too have a soul. The trickster is always called a villain, but in truth, he is the catalyst of transformation. The psyche, however, does not thank the catalyst. It resists, it attacks, it accuses, and so you find yourself surrounded by stories in which you are painted in dark colors. This is painful, yes, but it is also inevitable. The only question is, Will you allow their stories to define you, or will you remain faithful to your own inner truth? This is the crucible of individuation, to stand alone, surrounded by accusations, and yet not surrender to bitterness or despair. That is the task. To know that the voices which condemn you are not the voice of truth, but the echoes of fear. That is the knowledge that keeps you free. You may feel sometimes that you are losing your place in the world. When you are branded a villain, friends turn away, communities withdraw, even family may look at you with suspicion. But this too belongs to the archetypal journey. Every hero in myth is exiled before transformation. Every initiate must leave the familiar behind before discovering the treasure. You are not losing your place. You are being forced into a new one. The old world cannot hold the authentic self. It will always push you out for your very being, disrupts its balance. This exile, painful though it is sacred. It strips you of dependence, burns away illusion, and opens you to the deeper communion of the soul. Let us turn to the symbol of the shadow, for here lies the heart of the matter. The shadow is that part of the psyche which is rejected, repressed, yet it contains not only the so-called dark qualities, envy, rage, lust, but also the unlived potentials, the gold hidden in the dirt. Most people do not wish to see their shadow. They build their lives around avoiding it, projecting it onto others, pretending it does not exist. But when you live authentically, you cannot help but bring shadow into the open. You do not pretend. You reveal by your very presence what others are unwilling to face. And so they project their shadow upon you. They cast onto you their envy, their rage, their unlived life. You become, in their eyes, the embodiment of what they fear within themselves, and in this way you are made into the villain. But do not despise this role, for the shadow is not merely darkness, it is also treasure. By carrying their projections, you reveal to them what they must one day confront. You become the mirror in which they glimpse the forbidden parts of themselves. Even if they hate you, you are serving their growth. You are the dark angel who forces them, however reluctantly, toward wholeness. This is the paradox. You are condemned as villain, but you are secretly their guide. They may never know it. But your authenticity is a gift to them. It awakens what they would rather leave asleep. I tell you a secret. When you are accused, listen not to the words, but to the symbols. Do not ask, why do they say this about me? Ask instead, what are they revealing about themselves? For every accusation is a confession in disguise. When they call you selfish, it is their own hunger that speaks. When they call you arrogant, it is their own insecurity rising. When they call you dangerous, it is their own fear of truth. If you listen in this way, you will cease to be wounded by their stories. You will hear them not as judgments of you, but as revelations of them. And then you will see the deeper mystery, that your role as villain is not about you at all. It is about the unfinished work of their own souls. Do not imagine, however, that this knowledge makes the path easy. The heart still aches when misunderstood. The soul still feels the loneliness of exile. To live authentically is to walk with wounds, but these wounds, if borne consciously, become openings through which deeper life flows. The pain of being cast as villain softens your pride, deepens your compassion, frees you from the chains of needing to be adored. You learn to stand naked before life, without mask, without defense, and this is freedom. Though it tastes at first like loss, think of Christ hanging upon the cross. To the crowd, he was the villain, the blasphemer, the threat to the established order. They mocked, they accused, they turned away. Yet in that moment of rejection, he uttered words that reveal the secret of individuation. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. This is not only a religious utterance, it is a psychological truth. They know not what they do, because projection is unconscious. They do not see you, they see their own shadow. To forgive them is to recognize that their story is not yours, that their accusations are not about your essence. It is to remain free from hatred even in the face of rejection. This is the deepest strength of the authentic soul. And so I say to you, if you find yourself the villain in other stories, do not despair. Do not waste your life trying to rewrite their tales. They will tell them anyway. What matters is that you remain faithful to the story of your own soul. Let them paint you dark, you will shine regardless. Let them call you villain. You will live in truth regardless, for in the end, history forgets the lies, but remembers the essence. The collective may resist, but the unconscious never forgets. The truth you embody will live, even if they bury it beneath layers of falsehood. And when the time is ripe, that truth will rise again, shining through the ruins of their illusions. You must decide, then, will you live to be adored, or will you live to be real? For you cannot have both. If you choose to be adored, you must play the part they assign, wear the mask they demand, bow to the fiction they create. But if you choose to be real, you must accept being cast as villain. You must accept misunderstanding. You must accept exile. This is the price of authenticity, but it is also the path of freedom. For once you no longer need their stories to affirm you. You are untouchable. You live from within, not from without. You are no longer a character in their play. You are the author of your own. And this, in the deepest sense, is what it means to be whole. So, I ask you again, why does being real make you the villain in fake people's stories? Because reality is disruptive. Because truth threatens illusion. Because shadow cannot bear to be exposed. But do not fear this villainy. It is the crown of the authentic soul. It is the mark that you have chosen essence over mask, soul over persona, truth over fiction. Wear it with dignity, even if it is misunderstood, for in the end, it is better to be real in the wilderness than adored in the prison of lies. When you awaken to this truth, you will begin to notice a strange reversal. The very rejection that once tormented you begins to liberate you. For you see that to be misunderstood is no longer a curse, but a kind of initiation. You are no longer bound to the fragile web of reputation, no longer chained to the endless labor of maintaining a persona for others' approval. Their stories about you Those whispered fictions in which you play the villain become like smoke, rising but insubstantial, while your reality remains like stone beneath your feet. This is when you begin to taste the deeper freedom of authenticity, the freedom to walk without explanation, to live without defense, to speak without rehearsing how it will be received. You become, in the truest sense, so verein, yet sovereignty is not isolation. To stand real among the false is not to withdraw into cold distance, but to stand as a living symbol. You may not realize it, but in being cast as the villain, you are performing a symbolic function for the collective psyche. You are embodying the very shadow they avoid. In this way, you hold their unconscious material for them, even if they despise you for it. This is why Jung once said that the individual who takes on the burden of individuation does so not only for themselves, but for the whole world. Your authenticity, though it isolates you, also serves the larger process of human awakening. You carry what others cannot. You reveal what others repress. You embody what others deny. And though they call you villain, your role is sacred. Think again of the archetype of the dragon. To the villagers, the dragon is terror, destruction, danger. They tell stories of its cruelty. They whisper of its fire. But what they cannot admit is that the dragon is also the guardian of treasure. Its terrible presence protects the gold they secretly desire but fear to seek. And so it is with you. To those who fear reality, you appear as a dragon. Your authenticity burns away illusion, and they recoil. But beneath that fiery presence lies the treasure of truth, the gold of individuation, the shining core of the soul. You may never be thanked for playing this role, but archetypally, it is essential. Without the villain, the hero cannot awaken. Without the dragon, the treasure remains hidden. Without authenticity, the collective stagnates in its illusions. Do not forget, however, that within yourself also lives the temptation of the mask. It is not only others who create false stories. You too have woven them about yourself, and when others cast you as the villain, there is a secret gift. It destroys even your own illusions. You are forced to ask, who am I? Apart from how they see me, who am I? Apart from the stories I once told myself, this stripping away is painful. Yes, but it is also purification. You discover that your essence does not depend on any narrative. It exists before stories, beyond stories, beneath stories. And when you rest in this essence, you become unshakable. Even if the whole world called you villain, you would remain untouched. For you would know yourself not as a character, but as soul. In this way, what appears as curse becomes blessing. What appears as condemnation becomes initiation. The wound of being cast as villain becomes the doorway into deeper truth. For only when you lose the desire to be adored can you discover the freedom of being real. Only when you are willing to be misunderstood can you embody truth without compromise. Only when you descend into the underworld of exile can you rise into the sovereignty of the self. This is the paradox at the heart of individuation. You gain by losing, you rise by falling. You are freed by being rejected. The psyche works through opposites, and only by embracing them can you become whole. But I must warn you, this path is not without danger. To be cast as villain can awaken bitterness, can harden the heart, can turn authenticity into arrogance. If you cling to the role too tightly, if you begin to take pride in being hated, you fall into another illusion. The goal is not to be villain, but to be real. If others make you villain, so be it. But do not make it your identity. Do not mistake their projections for your essence. To do so is to become possessed by the archetype, to lose your freedom once again. A task is subtler, to carry the role without identifying with it, to bear the projection without becoming it, to remain rooted in your own soul, even while others tell their false stories. This requires humility as well as courage, compassion as well as strength. It requires that you remember always, they know not what they do. And here lies the deeper work, to transform your own wound into compassion. For when you see how much others must lie to themselves, how desperately they cling to illusion, how violently they project their shadows, you begin to pity rather than resent them. You see that their hatred of you is born not of knowledge, but of fear. And in this recognition, a strange love arises. Not the sentimental love of approval, but the deep love that comes from understanding. You realize that their stories are the prison of their own souls, and even as they cast you as villain, you can silently bless them, for you know they are trapped. You may never reconcile, you may never be friends, but in your heart you no longer hate them. You have transmuted bitterness into wisdom, rejection into compassion, villainy into grace. This is the highest alchemy of the soul. What then does it mean to live authentically in a world that may forever misname you? It means to live in fidelity to your inner voice, regardless of outer voices. It means to act from essence, not from fear. It means to bear misunderstanding without surrendering to despair. It means to walk the lonely path with dignity, knowing that loneliness itself is the womb of deeper communion with the self. It means to embody the paradox of being both light and shadow, both healer and disturber, both hero and villain. It means to be whole, and I tell you, this wholeness is worth every exile, every accusation, every false tale. For wholeness is the only treasure that cannot be taken, the only gold that endures beyond the illusions of time. To be real is to stand rooted in the eternal, while the stories of others rise and fall like passing clouds. One day you will die, and the tales told about you will scatter, but the essence of your authenticity will remain woven into the invisible fabric of the collective unconscious, a seed planted in the soil of eternity. Others may call you villain, but the soul knows the truth. And that truth, in the end, is enough. So let them speak, let them weave their fictions, let them call you names, whisper their accusations, paint you in shadows. None of it can touch your essence. None of it can dim your truth, for you are real. And reality, though crucified, always rises. Reality, though condemned, always endure. Reality, though cast as villain, remains sovereign. Walk then in this sovereignty. Live authentically, even when it costs you everything, for in losing everything false, you gain the only thing that matters, the truth of your soul. And so I leave you with this final word. Embrace the villain they make you, but do not become it. Carry the projection, but do not identify with it. Endure the exile, but do not lose your compassion, for in doing so, you will discover the secret that all mystics, all prophets, all awakened souls have known, that the real cannot be destroyed, that the truth cannot be silenced, that the essence cannot be erased. You may be the villain in their stories, but in the deeper story, the story written not by human mouths, but by the eternal psyche, you are the one who dare to be real. And that, my friends, is the only story worth living.